This is the Welcome Distraction Podcast with the Kemp Brothers. Their immature stories, thoughts, and opinions are their own and should be taken with the same level of seriousness as a drunk uncle's late-night conspiracy theory. They are not responsible for any brain cells lost, friendships ruined, or questionable life choices made under their influence. Now buckle up, buttercups.
Welcome to another episode of the Welcome Distraction. I'm Christopher with twin brother Brett and younger brother Nicholas. All right, today we're going to be talking about, movies, shows that wouldn't be made today in today's culture. But for some reason, a lot of us are glad they are. They exist. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the reasons why, maybe it be special effects or just, again, the culture and what it means today. But I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to brother Brett.
So the first one out the gate, I think that everybody will think of is Blazing Saddles. That used to be on TBS, TNT, growing up like every weekend, it seemed like. And sometimes you get the unedited version that would be popping up there because they would just throw around, some words that we don't use these days. But it was so controversial at the time. It was all centered around race. It's an old Western movie. If you don't know what it is, look it up. They still play it, and I think they even just put it back on HBO or something. They're making a promo. But it's got to be so different, especially if they played it on TV right now. It's not we don't live in the same world. It was actually had a good meaning behind it where they're trying to say a black man, African-American man can succeed in a predominantly white person's world. And so it had a message, but, they were just throwing every trick in the book out there to make sure that we got their
like the interview they did with Mel Brooks not long ago, and they asked him, would he make that movie today? And he said, "Oh no, we couldn't do that." And they're like, "Why?"
No.
We went too far.
We went too far.
And that was what they did. They were just trying to push the envelope, and it worked. It was definitely. Was it controversial? Was it not? That was the whole intent of it. Were they going too far? And by today's standards, they absolutely went too far. But it is a piece of history that. It exists for a reason.
Mm-hmm. It's like one of those things, people will say, it hasn't aged well over time. Those jokes were offensive back then, and they were trying to get your point and get a laugh. And over time, it's just really gotten even more the way the world is more offensive. And, so rightfully so, you got to take a hard look at some of those things and kind of cringe a little bit when you see some of those. But it's still a funny movie for all the jokes that are in it.
Nicholas, what movie you got that wouldn't be made today based on today's kind of standard and culture?
So kind of sticking in that same vein, probably Tropic Thunder, Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, good one. Classic.
You people.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily too far. I think in today's culture,
shame.
It would be shamed. Because a few people get offended by that, then you just can't do it at all. Even though I think it's one of Robert Downey Jr.'s greatest roles because he does such a great job.
He almost says he doesn't regret doing it, right?
No,
I think he says he still would do it. But he's also
did a hell of a job.
Yeah, he's got that career he can stand behind.
It's theater, they've been doing this for thousands of years. Men dressing up like women, playing a woman's role, when race gets involved, I guess it gets sensitive for people, but he was just playing a character, like he said,
I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. What?
And that one pushed the boundaries too with a lot of other things too, just the jokes, everybody trying to walk that fine line, and you never knew what you're going to get. But it was a hilarious movie too because it didn't take itself so serious.
It was one of Tom Cruise's best roles too.
Yeah, his little cameo.
A lot of people don't even know that.
Yeah, I think that opened up so many doors for Tom Cruise. He's the Mission Impossible action guy, but it also showed, hey, he doesn't take himself too serious too, and then we can kind of use that in the right moment, in the right movie too. So
that was one of the first movies too where they kind of developed a super cast. You look at the people that are in it. Ben Stiller, Jack Black, Robert Downey Jr. And was it Danny McBride, who was still kind of up and coming. Nick Nolte. We thought he was dead, and we saw him in that. And so many other actors. Tom Cruise, I think Matthew McConaughey was in it. So right. I'm glad that one exists. Would it be the same? Probably not. But yeah.
Tom Cruise played a bald fat guy in that movie, which he obviously is not. So hopefully he didn't offend any bald fat people.
You would know. So a movie that I'm going to go with that is hilarious that they wouldn't make today. I know they wouldn't make. It just wouldn't be as crude. There's two that are kind of up there and whatnot, but this one is super bad. For me, when I saw this in the movie theater, I saw it with a buddy of mine. Sometimes when you go see a movie with the right person, it makes a difference too, just because you just laugh and you're hamming it up.
It's all the difference.
Yeah, and it was one of those movies where you saw the trailer and you're like, "Oh, is all the funny parts going to be in it?" No, that movie just stopped, went on and on. Jonah Hill, McLovin.
This guy's either going to think, here's another kid with a fake ID, or here's McLovin, the 25-year-old Hawaiian organ donor. Okay, so what's it going to be?
I am McLovin.
I think with Michael Cera.
Yeah, I think another good one worth mentioning too that you just couldn't make today is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
No,
Gary's first big iconic roles. You just couldn't do it. It was so funny for all the other jokes that went in it, but because you can't, because with transgender and stuff, it's a very touchy subject, and it was just an over the top, ridiculous role back then. I bet he didn't have time to get rid of Mr. Winky.
He found Captain Winky!
Yeah, so now it's kind of like for 99% of the movie, it's just hilarious for all the other things. A dolphin and a pet detective kind of thing, and Jim Carrey with his physical comedy. But now it's just too offensive, and I get it. It's a different world we live in kind of thing, but it's a shame because there's so much more to the movie that is just hilarious, and what he did with that. And it was kind of, on a string, shoestring budget, and then it became very successful right after he left In Living Color, which is a good segue. That's another show where there's so many jokes in there that, of all kinds that you just couldn't do. And I think there was even an interview recently with one of the Wayans brothers that says, "No, we couldn't do that shit today. There's just no way. It was just too much."
Well, that's what it was. It was about making a splash, getting,
pushing the boundaries,
heard, bad news sells, sex sells, so to speak. And this was like controversial. It was to the point where like, can you put that on TV? They did.
Shit.
We're going to watch it.
We were in middle school. That was the same time as The Simpsons were controversial because they all came on around the same time. And because you had the Cosbys and the Huxtables over there that were all,
can't talk about that now.
Yeah, but it was a little bit weird now. But that was so wholesome, good show, and there's a lesson, and it's like Family Matters, and
talk about didn't age well.
Yeah, but then you had over there on the Fox network, you had The Simpsons and A Living Color, but nobody was really talking. You got a few chuckles from the Cosbys and shit like that, but nobody was talking about that the next day at school or at the water cooler. They were talking about Living Color's ridiculous jokes like "Homie, don't play that." And
I don't think so. Homie, don't play that.
The Simpsons, the stupid shit. It was just so. Yeah, now if you flipped it today, the stuff that the Simpsons are so,
tame,
harmless compared to the shit that's out there today.
Risky Business. I didn't know this at the time. I was doing some digging.
They make a movie about
Tom Cruise,
prostitution.
great movie. He plays a high school
He's just trying to make some
student.
money because he ruined his dad's car or something.
It's a Porsche. Come on, guy.
Yeah,
That's right. And so,
Something.
trying to make some money, he confronts this prostitute who, but it's condoned. They actually celebrate it.
Rebecca
All his high school
Dumont.
buddies get in on it, and they have a successful business model that I think eventually gets them into like Harvard or something. So a movie I was actually watching a couple days ago, and I'd forgotten all about it. It's a B movie. I'm not sure how many people have seen it, but Mallrats. You guys remember that movie?
No, yeah. That one was highly panned and labeled as a failure for director Kevin Smith, only to become a cult classic.
A lot of inappropriate things in there, but one part that I forgot is there's this girl who is graduating high school early, and she's only 15, and she's performing a study where she's sleeping in with as many men as possible.
Trisha here sleeps with a bunch of guys as research, and if that's not enough, get this, she videotapes all of them.
What?
Forget about that.
And she's got different categories, ages like 20, in their 30s and 40s. I'm like, oh my God, like this is in the movie? Like I'm sitting there watching that with my kids, and I'm like,
because back then we were like, what, 17, 18, or I was. You were her age, Nicholas.
Here's another movie.
What?
American Pie. Yeah. Came out in 1999. Yeah. And so, where kids get together and make a pact they're going to lose their virginity. The movie is basically focused on sex, and everybody remembers the famous scene about, bringing the woman in and her, getting really comfortable in his bed.
Nadia.
What was funny then, wouldn't be allowed to be funny now. People won't, let themselves laugh at stuff.
Yeah, gave us Stifler's mom, Jennifer Coolidge.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
right. And I think that's, the movies really kind of flow with, the times, and now, not a lot of those kind of jokes would fly or be successful.
Yeah,
Even
there's 4
though
of them. Go watch them all.
American
if you
Pie
haven't
did
seen
make
them.
4, and there's word they may be making a 5th.
I've
Because
heard
pretty
that'd
much
be
anything
awesome.
that makes money, they're going to go back to. In the days of nowadays, rebooting
There's
everything.
no original thoughts left.
They don't do as good.
Well, when
because
Top
they
Gun
can't keep-
Maverick comes out and makes $2 billion, and everybody's like, whoa, 40 years later, we can reboot that? We're going to
Yeah.
reboot everything.
Fast and the Furious 69. Wait, what?
Yeah. So what's a good TV show you think that wouldn't be made today?
So going way back, and you'd have to look them up to our, even us. It wasn't ones that we watched, but like All in the Family, I Dream of Jeannie, even Three's Company. These were ones that were 70s and 80s. They were trending topics back in the day, and they were pushing the boundaries of what they were at the time, like women's liberation, racist, interracial conversations and relationships. All in the Family was like that. I Dream of Jeannie was a guy that has possession of a woman, and it was still like
Captured.
that 60s and 70s. Yeah, and so she's basically like,
have this house clean when I get home.
And then Three's Company with the awesome
Get
John
back in your
Ritter.
bottle.
He was in a financial situation where he had to have 2 female roommates, but in
Mhm.
order for him to live there, he had to act like he was gay, so it was acceptable to the landlord.
Maybe so, but girls are better at this than boys.
Come on, Chrissy, a little less talk and a little more action, okay?
Who lived like right below him, and so every time he always went back into character of being this gay guy, and just you couldn't do that kind of stuff now because you're going to offend everybody, and that was pushing the envelope back then, and it was also fictitious. It's not an actual gay guy. It wasn't even until I think Ellen came out in the late 90s, early 2000s as a gay character, openly gay on a show, that kind of broke the mold for all that. Now everybody's gay all the time. It's gay happy place.
So would the issue be now that he's pretending to be gay? Would they be like, how dare you pretend to be gay? If you're gay, you need to flaunt it.
Yeah, I think that would be part of it. I mean, but then again, you talk about that. What about Modern Family? Where at least one of the actors that pretended to be in a gay couple was not. No,
Thought
but
about that.
damn, he did a good
And
job.
he did
man.
an
That's what
amazing
counts,
job.
You know?
Oh my god,
Eric
Made
Stone
that
Street,
show.
I believe is his name.
They,
and he did
they
such a
did
good job.
the characters justice and portrayed it. Well,
Mhm.
again, from my point of view, very good. And I think the community would be proud.
How about that show about the good old boys?
Dukes of Hazzard.
You talking about the old Duke boys?
With
Yep,
the
can't have it
Confederate
just 'cause
flag
of
on
the-
top of the
Oh,
car.
yeah, nope. Yeah,
Yeah.
that went to a sign of just rebellion to being, and through the world's fault, turning into an iconic racial emblem. So I completely agree with that. It just that it turned into that. It's definitely the epitome of something that did not age well, and it is what it is now. You can't have it. You could have maybe a different iteration, but it'd be hard to get away from that racial overtone stigma of anything to do with it, because when you think of Dukes of Hazzard, you think of the General Lee car with the huge Confederate flag. So no matter what you had the show based around, even if you had a different car that was the new General Lee, because I'm sure they would reboot it, and you didn't put that, you put something else on it, people would still be like, first you can't have it without the true car and emblem,
And
then
you
it
couldn't call
be
it General
rebuilt.
Lee.
Yeah, it's true. That's another thing. So, yep, yeah, it's taken such a different connotation over the years. Some, mostly rightfully so, with a lot of the twisted kind of stuff that it turned
It
into.
became a symbol of racism and negativity. So
and you can't
yeah,
have
can't
that.
support it now.
Even watching a lot of those old shows too, they're just so stupid. Well, I think
So-
one that's successful that wouldn't be made today for a number of reasons is Seinfeld. I don't think Seinfeld would last.
Oh, yeah.
Because, first off, it's just like sports. If you're not an immediate hit right out the gate, if you're not, winning the whole damn thing or having a great season,
Oh, yeah.
TV shows are the same way. If your ratings aren't there, you're lucky if you survive the whole season, let alone another season. Seinfeld, it just was able to marinate. It was one of the last shows that was able to gain a following. It wasn't a big hit right out the gate. It just kind of started to kind of find its way.
Became routine. Yeah.
the show that was about nothing, and then it became so iconic. So I mean, like people, younger kids that look at that and look back and watch it now, they'll be like, "What the hell's the fuss with this? I don't understand." And it's like, no, no, you got to give it like 100 episodes, then you'll start to like it. Friends is the same way, because that is a bunch of white people hanging out with their kind of lifestyle that is first world problems all the time and just the little things. And there's a lot of younger people that just they either love it or hate it. And a lot of them hate it because they're just like, no, I don't get it. And because of the way it is, I don't get it. I think it's somewhat funny, but I think it wouldn't be given the room to grow like it did back then.
I agree. So kind of changing subjects, but staying within the same movies that wouldn't be made today. What's a movie you can think of that the special effects are so bad or outdated that you cannot even give it a go? You can't watch it. You can't get through it. But yeah, in your mind, before you recently tried to watch it again, you're like, this is a good movie. What one movie that comes to me is, it's hard. It's still classic. It's one of the best ever, but it's hard to watch. The original Superman. The special effects are just so bad from what we see today. The Jurassic Parks of the world ruined it for any movie like that. And the special effects, it's good. R.I.P. Christopher Reeves and everything. Best Superman ever. But the movie itself is, it's hard to keep up and actually go backwards and watch those movies with the special effects that they did what they could for what they had. But
I mean, at the time, those special effects were decent, like where you spin
exactly
into the ground. People back then were probably like, wow, how'd they do that? Or when he's burning or freezing stuff, like, wow, cool. But yeah, nowadays,
it's just again, the society changes on what's acceptable, even with special effects. You're like, man, I can't watch this.
The whole Marvel universe would not exist.
Oh, yeah.
It couldn't exist until the time that it did exist, because the special effects just went before CGI was good enough and green screen stuff worked, because they tried superheroes back in the day. There was a Captain America, there was other superhero movies, and they just couldn't hold a flame. There were some that were starting to find their way with like X-Men, but when Iron Man came out in 2008, I believe, that one changed it, and that was where you could kind of see, everything came together.
Yeah.
So before then, you couldn't have those kind of things, because
you had the
Hulk,
you had Wonder Woman, and they were sitcoms. That's really all they were.
Oh God,
they had the
so
action in them, things of that nature. They were just everyday people, and don't make me angry, but that was about it. Yeah, definitely, 100%. Marvel wouldn't exist without the today's special effects for sure.
No.
I would say Star Wars is kind of up there. The original three.
Nope.
So A New Hope and Jedi Strikes Back. Those three.
I agree. They're just so iconic. People won't let them go.
I disagree. I think that they did such a good job with what they had to work with.
Yeah, at the time,
that
it was
those
great.
special effects, they actually do, most of them hold up. Compared, because it was late 70s, early 80s, I think what they did, it's not as bad as like what you're talking about, Christopher, with like Superman stuff. Like, they just kind of settled for what they had. Star Wars was like, okay, we still know what looks real and what doesn't look real. So, and they remastered them and those kind of things. But even those original versions back then, like, holy shit, that's pretty good.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Yeah. So, definitely.
It's not unwatchable.
Yeah. Good point. Because there's not a lot of points where you're like watching, you're like, what was that? How did that happen?
I tried to show the girls Short Circuit, and it's not one that has a whole lot of it, but it's just so cheesy that what I remembered in my mind and what it is now, you're just like, oh, shit.
So for those of you who don't know, Short Circuit's a movie about a robot that comes to life. No, kind of like artificial intelligence, nowadays. But again, the special effects for back then were, kind of puppeteering and remote control, things of that nature. But they've gotten so dated. Again, the Marvel movies have made it like, what are they doing?
And what made that movie successful was it was funny. It was a lot of jokes to it, and it was just like, haha. But at some point, the bad effects of it, you get so focused on that you're not enjoying the movie and the jokes, because you're like, oh my God, it looks so stupid.
About E.T.
Yeah, E.T. I think is another one that's in that same Star Wars world where it still holds up, even with the remastered stuff. But the whole wobbling and stuff and walking and
I agree with Nicholas on this. E.T. is hard to look at, like it's just a small person in a costume, and the way he waddles and all that. For me, it's a tough watch now.
Yeah, it became so beloved how it looked back then too, that when they did remaster it and they had the CGI stuff of like his head shooting up and moving around, people are like, "What? That's not even what ET really looks like." Because all of a sudden now he could move like what you would picture a normal movement instead of the whole awkward,
Right.
fumbling
Yeah.
around, flimsy kind of move. So
last subject, movies or shows that have aged not well and are so corny they wouldn't make it or survive or be popular today. My first one that I would say,
if you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team.
The A-Team. The A-Team was good for what it was back in the day, yeah. But the fact that no one ever died, everybody always walked away from it, Yeah, Mr. T was, kind of first of his kind, pity a fool, and, everything, afraid to fly. But I've tried watching it now, saw some reruns on it, and I was like, this is so bad. It's poorly written, it's poorly acted. There's this, just blow them up special effects. Yeah, it's tough to watch, for sure.
Yeah. I think somewhere in that same world too, for movies that were a big hit back then that wouldn't be now, is Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh yeah,
it was such dirty, kind of like Porky's is probably the same thing. Porky's I think was more of a B success, but some people that were in the Revenge of the Nerds, so the premise behind this is it's a college fraternity. These are outcasts because they're so smart. But it's not like the Big Bang Theory where that was a huge hit show because it was popular to be kind of nerdy. Nerdy was back then considered a taboo word and very offensive, and it's not like that now. It became the cool kind of nerd thing.
It really was the little guy versus the jock, and
David versus Goliath in the fraternity world.
For sure.
Yeah, and it was raunchy, so they wouldn't do those kind of things. And then another one that I think of that kind of goes all the way back to what we said, The Toy. You can't find this movie because it is so blatantly ridiculous. It's about a young kid. It's the same kid that gets his tongue. Yeah, he gets his tongue stuck to the flagpole in Christmas Story. That kid, he is the star of this, and what's his name? Jackie Gleason is the father, and he basically buys an African American, Richard Pryor, back in the day, 1982, and he basically says like, "Hey, I'm gonna buy you, and you're gonna be my kid's toy."
The black man.
He wants the black man. No, Eric, no, not today, not now, not never.
And this kid has absolutely everything he wants, but the premise is,
can you imagine?
He's not happy with anything.
Buy you,
so spoiled. So he wants to buy this plaything, Richard Pryor, to be best friends and do all the things with him because the kid, the spoiled brat, has no friends and he has all the stuff he wants. So
can you imagine?
For us as a kid, when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, if I could have all the stuff this kid does and somebody to play with all the time, oh my God, it'd be so cool. But yeah, you don't even hear conversations about that movie anymore because it's so wrong. He actually owns him. It is so wrong. It is absurd. Yeah.
I was just thinking about that now and the context, and what are you doing, man? All right, Nicholas, you got the last one. What's the last TV show, movie, for whatever reason, that couldn't make it today?
I know one we talked about, Hogan's Heroes. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that.
It's old, black and white.
It was a pretty popular show back in the day. Obviously we're too young to remember it when it was on. But we've seen reruns here and there. And yeah, it's about being locked up in a POW camp, and basically it turns the Nazis into like these lovable characters. Like they're just these nice guards that are like easygoing and fall in love with the character, and meanwhile they're
really
Nazis,
the atrocities there and doesn't recognize the fact that
now just saying the word Nazi is not acceptable. Period, and rightfully so. But I don't think even then people didn't understand the weight of everything.
Yeah, and how do you make a comedy out of something like that? But it was kind of like that's what the world was so consumed by for so many years. That this was like the 60s, I think. So, and it was a black and white TV show, and it had
back then it was maybe 20 years after the war. So,
and I think in that same vein was MASH, which had more lovable characters, but it was still during the Korean War, which was the 50s, and they were trying to make that show, and it was wildly popular. I think the MASH finale was the most highly rated TV show for the longest time. and the characters were so beloved when one passed away or died or moved on. It was a big deal across America, maybe even the world. But it was the wartime setting. So it's like, how do you make a show about that? So I think I've heard a lot of chatter that you could never make something like that and it be a comedy. There's still all kinds of them. You got the Band of Brothers and stuff, these serious ones that tell good stories, that might have a laugh in there, but they're not comedies. They're trying to make light of it.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna have one about Iraq or Afghanistan.
Nope.
MASH was a ton of inappropriateness, but they were portraying what things were like back then, a lot of inappropriate relationships. There was one guy who kept pretending to be gay so he could try to get sent home because he didn't want to be there.
Very true.
Yeah,
dressing up in women's clothes, things of that nature. Yeah,
but they were very accepting of him and they weren't letting him go home.
This is the end of our movies that they would make episode of the Welcome Distraction. It's been a pleasure having you aboard. I'm Christopher.
I'm the middle child, Brett.
Handsome youngest one, Nick.
We'll talk to you all next time. Peace.